Joining me from Canberra to talk more about Australia's population boom and the effects on the economy is Liz Allen. She's a demographer and postdoctoral fellow at Australia National University. Welcome, Liz.
Hello, good to be with you.
Now, let's start with the overall health of Australia's economy. How would you describe it?
I think Australia has fared quite well, particularly if we consider the global financial crisis. Australia withstood that and seemed to go on from strength to strength. There is growing worry, however, within Australia of inequality, and we see that particularly play out in among young people who are finding it quite difficult to access their first home, breaking into the housing market. Buying their first home is quite difficult. So there are still tax incentives in place that tend to favour the older boomer generation, if you like, the baby boomer generation, over the young people just trying to start out and start a family. So there's a conflict, if you like, going on in Australia that while our indicators internationally look quite healthy, there's growing concern about the inequality within the country and the socio-economic divide.
And Liz, adding to that, we saw that Australia's population is growing at a much faster rate than the government had predicted. In fact, it's doubled to 25 million since 1970. Why is that?
So Australia's growth has been quite healthy in the most recent years due to immigration, net overseas immigration to Australia. Now that has many advantages, which I'll get to in a moment. But that's only a recent thing. Prior to that, we had natural increase was the largest source of population growth, and that's the difference between births and deaths. Now, why is immigration important for Australia? Australia is quite unique geographically, and we're a relatively young country. We're also quite isolated, and we have the ability to monitor quite heavily the Australian borders, who comes in and who leaves. And with that, we have quite an advantage when it comes to a skilled migration program. Now, in Australia, our third largest export is actually students, higher education students, mainly from Asia, particularly China and India. So it stands to reason that we would see a complementary nature of the exports with higher education, where
Right.
students come in. They not only contribute to the education sector by being students, but they also fulfil very important skills in the labour force. They also are driving up the business sentiment and contributing to an economy. And without immigration, and certainly without what's called the sweet spot, the 160,000 to 210,000 migrants per year coming to Australia, net migrants, the issue is that below that, and we've certainly had calls to move below 160,000, below that we risk recession.
Now, Liz,
indeed, immigration has been contributing to strong growth.
Now, Liz, as you mentioned, the importance especially of Asian students coming to Australia. Now, you obviously have Australia that's really essentially stuck in the middle with this trade relationship with China. And how are they faring, especially given the ongoing trade tensions between China and the US? How is that weighing on the Australian economy?
I think that Australia definitely has really realised its role in Asia. And I think most definitely we'll see more steps over coming years, particularly with regard to the demographic need. And I think that will be a strong driver for Australia to really take care and look toward Asia as a continuing strong partner.
Now, as an export-heavy country, and you have all this uncertainty, you have these global trade standoffs, you have tariffs, you have protectionism. What do you see as Australia's biggest challenges to growth if these things continue to escalate?
I think public sentiment at the moment is quite concerning. There is a strong move toward protectionism generally, and we're seeing race relations becoming a major issue in the media. And I guess that's my concern, is that at a time when Australia needs to be looking to the world, you know, where we rely heavily on our global relationships, that the race relations with regard to concerns over people that perhaps don't look the same or are culturally different, and certainly we're seeing, as I said, the move to migration predominantly from India and China in recent years, where it's been European in the past. We need to make sure that Australia is still open for business, and that that public sentiment doesn't get in the way of our relationships. The other key worry for Australia too is our geography is such that water is quite scarce across the country. It's not evenly distributed, so there is concern about drought and about the possibility of environmental sustainability, and whether or not that can support a population, and in particular a growing population. But we're seeing much innovation here in Australia, and definitely, as a demographer, in my mind, the only limitation to Australia's population and economic growth is our innovation.
All right, well, thank you. We'll have to leave it there. Liz Allen there of Australian National University.